Who?
A hard-hitting entertainment reporter, I would say. So, Mr. Evanier, what's your favorite color?
Orange.
So we got that part out of the way. Have you ever been interviewed before and been the spotlight person?
Many times.
Okay, good. What were all the questions that were asked, so I won't do the same one?
Just ask whatever you want.
What is the first comic book you ever read?
I have no idea. I've been reading comic books since I was born. I tell people that when I was born, the doctor slapped me and I dropped a copy of Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. I've always had more comic books than anyone I know. I have more comic books than everyone in this room put together. I dare you to prove otherwise. So I can't answer.
Good thing Churchill is Ansky, isn't it?
Really?
Did you ever have aspirations to be a cartoonist yourself and draw as well as write?
I figured out when I was about 7 years old, I figured out, I got the one that tips. I figured out when I was about 7 or 8 years old that I wanted to be a writer. And I never deviated from that. I wasn't always sure what I wanted to be a writer of. Sometimes I would want to write comic books, sometimes I want to write cartoons on TV, sometimes I want to write books, sometimes I want to write live action TV shows, sometimes I want to write movies, and eventually I tried to do all of those. But I always wanted to be a writer, and at times I would draw stuff because there was nobody else around to do it. And on my first professional assignment, I actually made a few bucks drawing. And I did a little bit of drawing. And I thought, but it was as an adjunct to, to writing. I never wanted to draw anything I didn't write. And then at some point in the first year of my professional career, I figured out, I could probably make a decent living as a writer, but I'm going to starve as an artist. So I cut my artwork down, but I occasionally drew a comic book story. I've actually drawn a few comic book stories. I do covers on books. And I used to do my own lettering corrections and cover layouts and designs.
So, you've been to every San Diego Comic-Con?
Correct. Not to every day of every one.
Right.
Scott. I've been to I've set foot in every single San Diego Con, save for the Little League Fest that preceded.
So, how did it come about that you came to the very first Comic-Con in 1970?
Well, I had met Sheldorf and some of his convention committee. I was working for a thing called Marvel Mania International, which was a crooked organization that was taking money from kids for Hulk posters and occasionally sending them to them. And I quit this organization shortly after about a couple of months, so I realized how crooked they were. But Sheldorf and the Comic-Con, some of his Comic-Con staff people came by our office one day to tell us about this convention. And at the same time, I'd gotten to know Jack Kirby, and he told me about the convention. And so on the Saturday of the convention, the first day of the con that year, 1970, my friend Steve Sherman, who was my partner in some stuff I wrote with Jack, our friend Bruce Simon, Steve's brother Gary, and I all drove down for the day to San Diego. And we left like at 7 in the morning, got at about 9:30, and spent the day at the convention, and had an enormously good time. And I thought to myself, gee, I wish I could come back for another day of this. I had so much fun there. And we had like 300 people, the first one. Now there's 300 people ahead of you waiting in line to buy a Diet Snapple. But it seemed like, wow, 300 people in the same. We had a comic book club in the 60s that I was the president of. And we would be really excited if we had 30 people at a meeting. Sometimes the biggest one we would have was 40. And to have 300 people at this comic convention seemed like everybody in the world who was interested in comics was there. And I couldn't go back the next day. I tried to figure out, Steve didn't want to drive back. I didn't drive back then, so he didn't want to go back for the day. So I actually looked up, called up and see what it would cost me to fly down to San Diego for another day. And the cost seemed prohibitive, and I had run for 2 years, so I didn't do it. I kind of regret not going back and experiencing more of those first 2 days, the first convention.